Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wealth Preservation Podcast. Super excited for this episode, but first we'll introduce everyone here. Again, I am Mark Seither, and I am joined always by Josh Saunders. Josh, how are you doing, and where are you recording from?
Mark, how's it going, man? I am in beautiful, gorgeous, and currently foggy South Texas down here for my last. For those who don't know, I'm in the Navy, and I'm getting ready to retire out of the reserves in 39 days, so I'm down here finishing up my stuff. And I'll be a full-time civilian after that. So we're excited for that. But excited to have our guest on today, Chris Shuba of Helios. We're excited to be here. Thanks for being here, Chris.
No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Chris, you are out of Northern California, correct?
Correct. Yep. So east side of Sacramento, foothills coming out of Tahoe. Beautiful country.
Yes.
High taxes, but beautiful country.
Not a bad part of the world.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a great place if you don't mind the taxes.
Right.
So real quick, because we want to get into, in this first episode, how you became an entrepreneur, kind of your journey, what you did, what you failed at, right? The lessons you learned. But first, tell us what Helios does.
Sure. So the Helios kind of has two parts under one umbrella. The first of the parts is our outsourced CIO, or as we like to call it, in-source CIO business. Short version of a long story is I kind of grew up in the institutional world of money management. And I became buddies with a very, very successful financial advisor back in 2010. He said, well, how do we take all of these asset management capabilities, all these algorithms and quantitative approaches that are really good at kind of making decisions in the short term so that the compound rate sort of increases and then you end up with more probability of achieving long run goals? How do we do that in the retail world as opposed to a lot of either buy, hold, or balance or performance chasing? And back in 2010, it wasn't really possible, but by 2013 it was. So I left Columbia Threadneedle, where I was on the quant desk, went to work in the retail space. Other advisors started hearing about what we were doing, and so it made sense in 2016 to create Helios Quantitative Research, which is the first of the Helioses. We now support, I think we have roughly 800 individual advisors that we support, and about 30 or so billion in assets that we influence. And since 2016, so it's been a lot of growth. I'll tell you that in the last 4.5 years.
It's a lot of
the second part of a lot of growth.
That's
it's been
a
a wild
billion
ride.
with a B for our listeners who thought they heard million. That's a billion with a B. That's a big number.
Yeah. And so that's the first part of our business. Quick and easy story there. Second part of our business is, we've done a good job, and we continue to strive to do a good job of kind of disrupting the way that we think about asset management and bringing it more into a non-emotional kind of repeatable process state. And I wanted to do something on the financial planning side. And so we entered into the world of estate planning. I looked at what were financial advisors missing in the financial planning process. Where were they adding value to other people's businesses, but not necessarily their own? And estate planning was one of those. I happen to have a good friend of mine who had been a very successful estate planner around me. We got together and said, we can write some interesting software that can work like financial planning software, but for estate planning, and cut down on costs dramatically, about a fifth to a tenth of what it normally would cost to do estate planning, and turn that as a revenue stream for advisors while making it a deeper financial planning process. So those are the two sides of Helios. We try to do our best to keep them under one umbrella, but there's generally people that work with one, generally people that work with the other. We're doing our best to get people to do both, but it's two separate worlds at this point.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So on the next episode, just for everybody, we're going to dive into the whole quant portion. I'm sure we're going to get kind of nerdy on that, which is kind of fun, and and on the estate planning side. But we'll kind of leave that for the next episode. So if you want to talk quant and stuff, make sure you get the next episode because we'll dive into that. But this one's going to be your entrepreneurial journey. So that's really cool. So so you said it's 2016. How long did it take that to become from an idea to an actual business?
Yeah, it was kind of half on purpose, half accident. I think that's how most problems get solved. So I always say to folks, because I was a benefit of a lot of folks that would be mentors to me as I kind of grew up in business. And so I do my best to do that for others too. And one of the things I always say at the beginning of all of the mentorships is, if you want to have success, whatever the heck you call success, whether it's free time, whether it's money, whatever it might be, all you have to do is find a problem and solve it, right? And
sure,
the bigger the problem you solve, the more of this success you get. But that's only half of it. in order to remain successful, you have to love a problem, not whatever solution you made for it. And that's where most entrepreneurs fail, is they identify a problem, they come up with a solution for it, and then they can't let their solution go. The problem evolves, and all of a sudden they become irrelevant. And
Gotcha.
if you love the problem, you're constantly evolving with it. And that's really what was the luck portion of Helios. So when I got out of the institutional space, I had a really rough time identifying with retail financial advisors. And that's because all of our thought process was about how do you make decisions now that, seek to maximize the long run probability of a goal happening. Well, compounding is the most powerful force in investing. So what you're really saying is, how do you make decisions that advocate for more compounding into the future, right? Some years are good, some years are bad. And some advisors really resonated with that and others didn't. And it came to find out, and I can dig into it if you want to, that there's really different types of advisors that we now have cute little names for. And we built ourselves around about a quarter of the advisors that we call planners, that are really focused on, selling expertise, selling financial planning, and then making decisions that make that plan come to life. So how we ended up doing what we do is just being really focused on the problem that we felt was there's not enough advisors out there that are making the right decisions for long run planning. There's a lot of advisors out there that are chasing returns. There are all those things that are out there. But by being hyper focused on what we do, we just attracted a certain set of advisors to us.
Got it. So going a little bit further back too, in your upbringing, like as a kid, did you have kind of an entrepreneurial mindset? I mean, the loving the problem, right? Was that like, 8-year-old Chris's like, were you the dude who was raking it in on the candy sale, just like, ha, suckers?
Yeah. It's really funny you ask that question, because a lot of folks that I run in groups with that are also running companies, we all have the same stories, right? All of us were the ones that were in, Cub Scouts, and when you went door to door, we wanted to break all the records, right? Or, found some way to make some money off their friends, buying and selling baseball cards from each other. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there's a common, mindset. For me, it really wasn't about making money. It was more about, the thrill of facilitating some transaction. I can't explain it any better than that, but yeah, my past is littered with a bunch of those, just like I think everyone else who's ever started a company. So yeah.
You get don't they call it transaction high? Is that what the real term for that is?
It's something like it. I mean, there is an effect when a deal gets done that, yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Usually ends up with booze, and that's a problem in and of itself. So.
And sometimes it starts with booze too. So,
Yeah, I gotta try that one. I've never tried to close a deal after booze, but whatever.
Yeah. So you're selling candy door to door, and you're kind of getting that thing going. But when were you like, hey, I'm gonna go to college, and because at some point you kind of stuffed that entrepreneurial down a little bit, because you're like, I'm gonna go down that path and go institutional money, or were you always kind of attracted to businesses that were entrepreneurially driven?
Yeah, it's interesting. You cut up a little bit there, but I think what you're talking about is just how did I end up choosing my path a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
sure.
Cool. So when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I thought I was going to go into law, but I ended up not liking it. But I liked math. It was just easy, it was rules based. You just apply the rules and you get what you get. And I was my freshman year, I was struggling in a statistics class, and I figured out that if I rewrote the questions in the form of baseball, that I could make the statistics make sense. It's kind of a weird way to think about it. And in the process of doing that, I figured out that all the bookies' lines were wrong, as they figured out how to gamble between different teams. And so it kind of became a project of mine to figure out, well, how much are the lines off and what would be the betting opportunities? So myself and a couple buddies, we kind of put in a little bit of money, and, we didn't really need jobs in college because it worked out pretty well. But, then later, years later, it kind of ended up where, Moneyball came out, and well, all that was based off of a guy And, of course, right now I'm trying to remember his name, but he wrote something called the Baseball Abstract. His name was Bill James. When I was a kid, as I remember telling you, selling baseball cards back and forth, well, we used to read Bill James's Baseball Abstract, and all the sabermetrics and so on and so forth would roll through that. So in college, it was really kind of, I was setting myself up for my career, which right after college, I would end up getting into the mathematics side of finance, starting on the mortgage side, believe it or not. And that was kind of how it just happened. I ended up working for a guy who was brilliant and taught me a lot. And it just kind of, once you get a little kickstart in your career, you end up going where you're going. I didn't really set out to build Helios. It wasn't like a driving force that, oh my God, I need to be an entrepreneur. But once you identify a problem and you love that problem, your belief structure is, well, no one can solve it better than me. So then you go do it. Whether you're right or wrong there, that's a different question. But I know that's
Right.
the drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you funded, you didn't have to get a job in college because you cracked the code on sports betting, essentially. Like you were able to find the disparities between what, what they were putting out as far as how much money to put on this. And you kind of figured out like, hey, I think they're wrong. And I think this is a better opportunity over here.
Yeah. Basically what happened back in the day was that a bookie didn't really care to get the lines right. They just wanted to attract an even number of dollars on both sides.
Got it.
So it was basically, okay, well, if I've made the line too attractive for one side, then the line will shift to get money to go on the other side. And essentially the bookie's making the spread or the differential in between.
Mm-hmm.
So there was never any real goal on their end to ever be accurate. It was just a perception of accuracy.
Got it.
But if you could actually calculate, well, here's really how many runs will be added or subtracted over the averages that would be expected because of prevailing winds or weather or the combination between the pitcher and the way that umpire calls balls and strikes, you can start to figure out that there's a 1 run, 1.5 run, 2 run differential based upon the average, and the lines would be all wrong. And if you did that many, many times in a row, you'd end up scraping the error effectively that bookies would create. Essentially, as time went on, they got a lot better at really doing the sort of analysis. So you really can't do that anymore. But back in 1996, you could. And that was just the deal.
So were you writing code back then also to do that?
Really didn't require a lot of code. It was more just massaging and managing data. So yeah, back then there was the rudimentary forms of VBA that you could do in Excel that worked out, but no, it really wasn't super code heavy back then.
Got it.
A lot of Excel spreadsheets, though, I would guess.
Yeah, a lot of Excel spreadsheets and daisy chaining a bunch of, Pentium computers together to make sure it could go fast enough. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
So I mean, you get out of college, right? And now you're, I think, what was your first job out of college?
I was actually going to be a stockbroker at Oldie Discount Stockbrokers, and it lasted about 4 months. I think I got my Series 7 and then quit like 2 days later.
Was that like a chop shop or what? Or was that an actual stock brokerage?
Well, it became H&R Block Financial Advisors. Oh no,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
but no, you're not too far off. It was Oldie Discount Stockbrokers. It was an old firm, and then right when I joined it, it got bought by H&R Block, and then years later, H&R Block Financial Advisors was bought by Ameriprise. So
got it. Okay, so were you part of Ameriprise, or did you get out of there before all that happened?
Oh yeah, I was long gone from Oldie. Years later, I ended up back at Ameriprise, and while I was at Ameriprise, they bought H&R Block, which was funny. So I threw a few texts around to old friends, but yeah.
Man, to do all that work to get your Series 7, then like 2 days later, be like, yeah, that test was enough for me. I'm out.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like I'm truly interested in the stuff that's in the 7. So it was never really work. It was, whenever you're learning about something that you like, it doesn't feel hard.
Uh-huh.
So to me, the 7 was really never like a hard test. Reading a book about Old Yeller and writing an essay on it, that was my Achilles heel, right? So if it had been an Old Yeller book report I had to turn in, yes, I would have felt that way. But, taking a test on, options, okay, cool, I'll do that all day long. So.
Yeah. So where did you go after? What was it? Goodies, oldies, goodies. What was
Oldies?
Oldies.
Yeah.
Where'd you go after there?
So I danced around a little bit, but I ended up working for my dad.
Ooh,
And
I mean, did that last as long as the Series 7 or?
my dad's great.
Oh.
He's a fantastic guy. He'll outwork you. He'll just put his head down and you're done, right?
Mhm.
But his business it was never interesting to me. So I was just kind of hanging out there. And after a year or two of that, I said, I gotta get back into what I like doing. And so I ended up in just a roundabout way in the mortgage business. And it was there that really the math part of my world took off. Because at the time, we were trying to value what large blocks of mortgages were actually worth.
Mhm.
And they had a worth structure in terms of the actual note, right? So what were the prepayment penalties? What type of documentations you have? What the credit score look like? And big companies, whether it was an endowment or a pension fund or a brokerage of some sort, would buy large blocks of mortgage and obviously turn them into, CLAs or any other type of collateralized
Mhm.
debt concept. And and then it was also relative to the whole economy. Could the economy support these debt loads? And at what point in time did this economic type of calculation say, oh, well, when the economy falters this way, here's how mortgage defaults are going to happen, and here's how high up the tranches they're going to reach, and so on and so forth. So all that modeling was being done and in the run up, really in the 2002, 2003, 2004,
Mhm.
and the models kept on breaking. The risk that was being taken on, and frankly, the risk that was being okayed by ratings agencies started to all kind of crack and shatter. And we didn't know what was going on, but we knew it was bad, right? And that's what's really funny about like the book, like the Big Short
Mhm.
and things like that. They write these books like these three guys are the only three people in the world who knew there was a problem. No,
Right.
there was
Yeah.
whole conferences with giant sessions of hundreds of people talking about something's broken, right? But whatever, that's just the nature of the beast in our world these days with people writing books. But
Quick side note,
so
Chris.
that
That was
was my
probably
clue
everyone's
that we
like,
had to get out of it. It was 2006. I'm done. So go ahead.
I would say probably it was because, but hey, we're all making money, so let's not stop the gravy train while it's still going.
Yeah.
We know it's broken, but everybody's buying Porsches and Ferraris, so let's just keep that bad boy going until it stops, I guess.
That was exactly it. I mean, and you had 18-year-old kids that had just graduated high school swinging mortgages to people who had no job, no credit score, no nothing, and it was getting funded.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, but at the time, no one knew just how deep it had gotten. No one really understood just how interconnected all the banks were with their own credit default swaps. No one understood just how prevalent and how many pension funds and other investment vehicles, or a buy-side investment that was pinning all of their hopes and dreams on rating agencies. Like everyone knew it existed, but no one just knew how intertwined it was. And so obviously when Bear and Lehman kind of fell out of that spider web, it just dragged the whole spider web down with it.
Mhm.
And hindsight's 2020 on that. But in 2006, we knew it was broken. I kind of got out of the mortgage business, said, look, I don't know what's wrong, but I know something is, and I'm not going down with whatever it is. And but I
Yeah.
knew that all this economic and quantitative modeling that we had kind of spearheaded there had value, and that's how I ended up with going into Ameriprise, right, in their strategy group.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So, real quick, anecdotal side note: I had a buddy of mine. His cousin was one of those 23-year-olds, dude, that bought a Ferrari in 2005.
Yeah.
From the mortgage business. I mean, he was like slinging mortgages. I mean, that's when you were getting big money on a mortgage too. And it wasn't like the 0.5%. It was like you were getting a point and a quarter on the whole thing, and just like making money hand over fist. And of course, he doesn't have a Ferrari anymore.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll give you a story.
Yeah.
We used to have in these mortgage offices little cartoon bucks, right? And like with antlers, okay? And these bucks had 5-point antlers. And every time that these sales guys would sell a 5-point loan, not a half a point, not a point and a half, a 5-point loan, they got a 5-point buck, and they would stick them on their walls like football players stick stickers on their helmets, right? And people had dozens and dozens of them all over their walls. 5 point bucks. And they'd say, hey, it's a tax write-off. Why wouldn't you pay us 5 points?
The good old days, man.
It was mind blowing. And you're just wandering around this.
Yeah.
There was a kid, and I know his name to this day, but I won't say it just in public here, who sat there and legitimately explained to me why he needed to have a plane. I'm like, you're 24 years old. You know, you have a good career, but you're selling mortgages. You want a plane? Are you kidding? You know, that was the kind of, but it was totally a rational conversation back then. It was mind blowing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so real quick, what was some of the modeling that you were seeing when you were like, this just isn't working? What was breaking, just out of curiosity? I mean, we've read The Big Short and all that kind of stuff, but what were you seeing that was like, hey, this is really broken?
Yeah. Two sides of it. The first one is just what folks were paying for largely just horrible mortgages, right? So these orders would come in and they would literally be, we're willing to buy $5 billion of no income. They tell us what they make. Basically the lowest possible credit scoring or even no credit score available kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they were willing to buy it. Like they were placing orders for it. That's how we knew it was broken. The valuation metrics were destroyed. And what we didn't realize at the time, which I'm oversimplifying a far more complicated problem, was that the belief structure in all of these big collateralized loan series was, the belief structure was that if you piled enough of them together, that they all wouldn't go bad at the same time. And that some of the more vulnerable tranches to defaults, they may or may not lose their money, but they're making good money. These loans are being paid 5 points. They're 5.5% rates. They're worth that risk. But there's no way the senior tranches are going to get hit. And that's when everything buckled, is when suddenly those senior tranches started to get hit. Yeah. And so it was, the reason those orders were coming in was based upon a false thought process that, well, if they just had enough of them, it wouldn't matter, kind of a deal.
Got it.
I'm paraphrasing.
Hey, just for all of our listeners, basically, Chris just explained the entire Mortgage Meltdown in less than 2 minutes. So there you go. we bring on the best guest here. We
could probably do a much longer episode just on that. I mean, that.
Yeah. I oversimplified a hell of a lot of stuff there, but you get my feeling.
Yeah.
So you leave the mortgage mess, right? And you have this knowledge of quantitative analysis and all this. Like, what did you go to Ameriprise and kind of show them, like, hey, here's what I can do? And then what was the other? Where did you move on from Ameriprise onto?
Columbia.
Where was that
at? In terms of where was it? Was the same building as Ameriprise.
Oh, okay.
Because Ameriprise brought. Yeah.
I don't know if you had to like move across the country or whatnot.
No. So I went to work at Ameriprise. And it was, I really liked working there. There's good people, had a great time. But it's this part of my career and where I was kind of horribly misemployed. I just come out of something that I loved doing, but was functionally broken in my mind. Math and quantitative analysis is where it was. But so I took some time off and moved from California. I got married, moved from California, moved to Minnesota, where my family's from. My wife's family's from Green Bay area, so it's back in the Midwest. Took some time to just kind of say, what do I really want to do here? A job popped up at Ameriprise with some good people, and so I took it. And that was April 23rd, I believe, of 2007. So you can kind of see where this is going. And short version of a long story, I ended up having like 4 or 5 jobs at Ameriprise because all these groups I would work in as the recession rolled on were just getting annihilated and nuked, and massive layoffs. And I'd be here one day and this was my boss, and I'd be here a different day and this was my boss. And it was and all great people, and I really enjoyed working there. But by the time I ended up with my like 4th or 5th job there, I'm like, I have no passion around this, and I'm not any good at it. I'm gonna get let go here because now I'm doing things I don't like. And that was kind of this moment that I think a lot of folks hit, where you say, I'm going to take control of my career and my job. And so that's when the move to Columbia happened, but it took a little while and a lot of planning, digging through some of the CFA work and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess what was like the key, I guess like indicator? Did you have like a specific moment, or do you have a story about when you really figured out like, I am misemployed, and define misemployed in your words?
Yeah, I do have it. I do have a moment. So there is a important person in my life by the name of Dave Reich. And unfortunately, a few months ago, Dave, who's in his, I don't even know his age, late 40s, early 50s, beautiful family, was on a bike ride and had a heart attack and died. And he had kind of saved me at Ameriprise early on when the first round of layoffs, the big round happened. I probably would have been part of that cohort that got laid off, but he plucked me out of one group and brought me into his, and then it was dancing around in his group. But he had me do a cost benefit analysis of something one day, and he was always a very kind of a straight shooter guy. And I put together one, and I put together hundreds of them, and he just kind of looked at me and he goes, "Your heart really wasn't in this." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're pretty much right." And he goes, "Go put your heart in this, come back and bring it to me. Let's talk about where you need to go." You know what I mean? And so it was that began a series of probably 100 coffees with all kinds of great people to figure out where I needed to go to. And at the time, Ameriprise had just bought Columbia. They were forming the first quant desk, and that's where I ended up finding kind of the home, was taking everything I learned over in the quant space on mortgage, and dropping that into the asset management world. So.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk quant too much on this episode, but how did you kind of see that hey, this is where finance is going? Was it just because you could take massive amounts of data and run it through a computer, and you're like, hey, there's an opportunity here to find an efficiency, or kind of what brought that part around?
Well, I always thought that asset management was a function of a process, right? So you didn't find portfolio managers at Fidelity's Magellan Fund or at Renaissance, and they just made stuff up or changed their stripes every quarter. They had a process, they had a way of being. And what I learned early on in the mortgage space is that any process you can automate becomes a less risky process, right? You take the human piece out of it. And so quant was always just a natural extension of humanity to me. If you could build something that as a human was great, and then have that always run the way that it should be run without the human risk, well, now I've got the best part of humanity without the risks of humanity. So quant to me was never about high frequency trading, or it was never about trying to game the system. It was basically just saying, how do we not mess up what we know to be the best thing? And that was my attraction to it initially.
Yeah.
So what was it like being at a bigger institution like Columbia and running, basically starting something that was kind of, I wouldn't say in its infancy, but the quant space was kind of new then, right? Or newer. And what was it like, kind of being on that cutting edge? I mean, you were like, you're like the hot guy, the hot girl at the ball at every conference, right? Because you're like, oh, you're on the quant team. That's the new space. What was that like?
Well, it wasn't like that in the beginning. In the beginning, it was like, wait, what do you do? That was number one. And then number two is they're like, well, aren't you the guys? How'd you get a window? You're supposed to be a guy in the closet, in the basement somewhere with your red stapler. Like, why are you up here? When you first get on the trading floors. But no, I mean, the group at Columbia had already been started. There was, I think, 2 people in the group, so I was like number 3 or number 4. So a lot of the ice had been broken, and we had a great team. Probably still the best team I'd ever been a part of was that group. In fact, we all still talk on Bloomberg chat, just to kind of keep up with each other. But the hardest part, and still the hardest part with quant, is people don't understand what it's supposed to do, right? You read these books and you think, oh, it's the secret sauce, and everyone's running around in yachts, or you hear the story of it exploding, right? And you have the onesie twosie companies that don't make it. I look at quant as like an airplane. It's by far and away the safest way to travel, the fastest way to travel, the most efficient way to travel, right? But when one crashes, it makes the news, right? And so people then say, well, I'm just going to get in my cars. Well, yeah, you get in your car, you feel like you have more control, but the odds of you dying and getting in more accidents are way higher. But it's the perception. And so, the rest of the world, in my opinion, kind of drives cars around, makes them feel good, makes them feel like they're in control. But if you want to jump on an airplane, far better for you. But yeah, the death is scarier. If it goes down, you're screaming the whole way. Car accidents happen quicker, right? And it's easier to blame yourself when you get in a car accident, right? But if someone else is driving, that doesn't feel good either. So I'm making up this analogy on the fly. I hope it worked out good. You can edit it out later if it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pilot, so I get it.
Yeah, you're a pilot. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, my wife is deathly afraid of flying, and she wants to drive anywhere. So I totally get the analogy of like, hey, we feel like we're in more control, but I mean, we're getting on Interstate 80. Do you realize how many accidents happen every day on Interstate 80?
Yeah. Well, imagine this. I mean, imagine an airplane flying by another airplane, right, with only a foot in between it, right? That's what cars do every day on the road.
Yeah.
There's like this much room. You're going 80, you know,
like,
totally
don't
normal.
Worry, there's plenty of windows that'll shatter if we crash.
Yeah, it'll be fine. So we got crumple zones, man.
Yeah. So I guess what was it? Because I want to get more into Helios in the next episode, but I do want to talk a little bit about that jump, right? Because you're at Columbia, you're doing you're doing your quantitative analysis. When did you decide, hey, I'm going to go do my own thing? And did you have anyone that was kind of like, hey, you kind of got a good thing going. Are you sure you don't want to hold back?
Yeah. That was tough. So, you know, if you go back to, you know, last year's in the mortgage business, right? That was a company that I co-owned, right, at the time. So I had gone from an entrepreneurial space, got out of it because, in my opinion, my industry was dying, and then got it back into the employee realm. So I'd had a little bit of a taste of, you know, being able to run your own shop and do things that, you know, solve the problems you wanted to solve. And so, so it wasn't a huge leap for me. By the time 2010 rolled around, that was when I was making the moves in the first place. And it was already a little bit on my mind that quant was so new that there were other applications of it. But by 2013, I think I was ready. I was ready to work in a smaller environment where, you know, the folks at Columbia were great, but it's like turning an aircraft carrier. You know, if you want to say, oh, hey, there's this new cool area you need to be exploring, well, you had to get permission from your boss and their boss's boss, and we would even use it, and they'd want to track it for years and years and years before there was any practical application of it. Which I get it, right? I can see that being a very conservative business decision, but quant moves too fast for that. And so by the time 2013 rolled around, you know, I was kind of ready to get into a more experimental environment and see what happened with it. So it was a risk, but it's one of those things, you know, risk and return. I felt it was a lower level of risk for the possible return.
And I mean, I guess what was that initial? Well, did you have anyone that kind of like coached you through, like, hey, you need to get out on your own, or people who were the opposite that were like, hey, Chris, I'd stick with the W-2 paycheck coming, you know, twice a month.
Yeah. So the advisor that I mentioned I met back in 2010 was the person who's still a great friend and client to this day, who was really in my ear, who said, you know, you're either going to basically work to build your own dream or you're going to work to build someone else's dream. What do you want to do? And that type of conversation and mentorship is what eventually, once I felt confident that I could deliver something quantitative in the retail space, and that the advisors that I would be working with and for were like-minded. I mean, asset management is so much about perception and the way that you process information, that if you're not aligned philosophically with what's most important, you flame out, right? That's why you see so much rotation in mutual funds and ETF usage, is that people buy performance by and large without ever really getting into understanding how and why decisions are made. And as soon as the performance isn't there, which is basically a guarantee, at some point in time, every strategy will struggle relative to something else. You see these rotations, you know, these things that come and go, and the consistency falls apart. So once I was convinced that we could deliver something in the retail space without using a lot of trading activity or derivatives, and that we could do long only type stuff that was meaningful, as well as the philosophy lined up, there wasn't a lot of risk there to me anymore. And, you know, and Brett was really, you know, the instrumental voice saying, you know, you're making a lot of people a lot of money. Why don't you make yourself some, kind of a thing?
Right. Yeah.
That is great advice. Yeah. If you're making a lot of people money, make some for yourself.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so you kind of, like, you made the jump from Columbia. How long did that take to get, you know, to be like, hey, I'm leaving Columbia and I'm starting my own thing, to kind of form that business model and get it up and running? Was that, you know, like we always say here on the podcast, you know, it's never an overnight success, right? Or it's a 10-year overnight success. How long did it take you to kind of get that up and running and be like, okay, I can make this work?
Yeah, well, right out of the gate, it was about building the solutions that were needed for that practice, and that was a big practice. That was a billion-dollar practice at the time. They're now at about
Sure.
1.8. Great group of guys and gals now, but the three partners are guys. And so there really wasn't on day one this entrepreneurial aspect to it. It was really about building a solution that worked well for them. And in the back of my mind was, well, there's such a big name in their broker dealer and around that if it did well, people were just going to hear about it. So it really was
Right.
the end of 2014, November of 2014. We were at a conference that was for that broker dealer, and word kind of got out, and that was really the beginning. Now we had a lot of people knocking on our door saying, "What exactly are you doing over here?" And it was kind of the beginning of what would become Helios. As soon as other folks started figuring it out a little bit. So so yeah, I mean it was probably a couple year journey to not only develop what needed to be developed for the retail side, but then also have it work
Mm-hmm.
and have enough track record, quote unquote, if you will, to demonstrate it. So a couple of years, um, but it wasn't on purpose. I always like to joke that Brett, my one of the partners at the firm I went to, had to fire me because as what would become Helios got bigger, um, it kind of became at odds with that broker dealer because the broker dealer had their own solutions they were selling to advisors,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously they have a duty to supervise. And so I think a lot of advisors over the years had come to them and said, "Hey, we do some asset management in house. We want to sell it to some other advisors." And they kind of said, "Okay, yeah, go for it." And it would happen in little onesie twosies, but it never took off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ours took off, right? And within a very short window of time, we had 10 of the top 1% practices that were working, in the same line. And hundreds of millions were pouring out of what they were basically selling
Mm-hmm.
into
Right.
this new way of thinking. And then all the red flags went up. And so we entered into a little bit of a contentious period that, now is all water under the bridge. But they basically said, look, if you want to keep doing this, you need to leave, and you need to leave immediately from this broker dealer. And so that was the leap. If you guys want to know the moment where someone says, I'm stepping out with no parachute, leaving Columbia wasn't really that. Leaving
Okay.
this practice was that moment where, you're stepping
Yeah.
out into air and hopefully the chute works kind of a
Yeah.
deal. So,
Hey, so Chris, was there a did you lose a whole bunch of AUM at that point, or was it kind of like you kind of lost and had to rebuild, or is it a kind of a smoother transition? How'd that go down?
yeah. So, I mean, because we were under compliance review at that broker dealer, and they were deciding whether or not they were going to let us keep doing what we were doing, they made us go dark. So we had more or less, except for, just conversations that had nothing to do with asset management, we were dark with our advisor teams that had signed up with us while we were still part of that broker dealer for months. So we really didn't know once I stepped out and created Helios, what, if any of them were going to stick around or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Right.
interesting, we had also been telling people that, we couldn't take on any more clients. We had said there was only, 10 slots available because that's what we had improved to do from compliance. But there was a couple of slots, a couple of other folks that had always said peripherally, well, if you ever get more spots, call me. So not only did we retain all 10, but we got 2 more that had been waiting for spots.
Mm-hmm.
So on day one, it was very nerve wracking, but by the end of day one, we were all good. So it was,
Yeah.
there was still those moments where you really just didn't know what was going to happen. But no, so we were blessed. I was blessed to not have any debt whatsoever. The thing cash flowed immediately on day one, which was great. But that wasn't always the case with our estate planning, right? That one didn't cash flow on day one.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on both
Right.
ends where you're blessed with cash flow, and I've also been where you have to fund something. So
Yeah.
you stick around the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial space long enough, and you'll get both.
So real quick, when you're getting this up and going, and was it all you at first, or did you bring your own team on, or how did you build that part of it? Or was it just all Chris at the beginning?
Yeah, in the very beginning, it was all me. From a practical perspective, Pam Burke, who's our COO at this point, back then she was doing our books, so she had been attached to that practice that we had been working with, and so because we had cash flow coming into that practice, she was very familiar with our finances. So when when I stepped out, the guys were gracious enough to give me some of her time as kind of an independent contractor, right? So I had Pam for like,
Okay.
3 hours a month or something like that, to kind of help keep the books. And so that was March 1st. I'm sorry, that was March 31st. So April 1st is April Fool's Day is our corporate holiday. And so
That's awesome.
By July, I had talked to a good friend of mine by the name of Joe Mallon, who's now our chief investment officer, our CIO. And he and I had worked together at Columbia. And we left at a similar time. He went to become the CIO of a company called Sawtooth. And it wasn't what he wanted. So I talked him into joining Helios for a lot less money, but a lot more upside. So things have worked out well.
So how did you talk him into coming? How did you talk him to coming in? As your buddy, right? Was it like, hey man, there's this huge upside, and I'm cutting you in on the equity. I mean, how did you structure that to have him come over? So you could keep your best employees, because that's always hard, right? In the beginning, is keeping good people, because so many businesses fail. They make that bad hire, and it basically tanks the whole company.
Yeah. I'm lucky so far, knock on wood. You don't have success in business without some luck, right? And that's one of the things where, Joe and I had kept in touch. He's brilliant. But what I think really attracted him to what Helios would become is we're very, very specific about the types of advisors we support, right? We're very direct. We're very honest. We're very transparent. And I think that there's a certain number of folks that we tend to attract here at Helios that really just value that in asset management. And there's so much BS in our industry. There's so many people pretending to know what they're talking about. And it's the people that know the least that are going to yell and scream the most. And no one knows it all. No one knows what the next crisis is going to be. No one knows how asset management is going to do, but there are really definitive, mathematically important things that you can deploy in a portfolio environment that'll give you a fighting chance. And that's the kind of world that we believe in. So I think, the folks that are all part of Helios now, they've drank the Kool-Aid of, we see asset management a very specific way, and that's all that we do. We're not going to be everything to everyone. And that's kind of the way Tesla works. It's kind of the way Uber works. These kind of companies that are just, this is how we see a broken system, and we're going to do our little piece to disrupt it.
So real quick, because I do want to touch on that, because it sounds like you're like, hey, we found our niche, right? Like what was the, I guess what's kind of your take on, and I think this is where entrepreneurs can kind of trip over themselves, is they're like, well, I need money. I'm going to help everybody, right? Like I want everyone as a client, but instead of being like, I need the right client, right? I need the right person. How did you guys fine tune that? And then I guess distract yourselves or push all the other distractions out of like, oh, well, we could do this over here. We could do this over here, and just stay laser focused.
Yeah, well, I don't want to lie and say that we didn't chase some business from time to time, as you grow, for sure. But what really helped me a lot crystallize and be as emphatic as I'm being right now was really 2020. And there was actually a moment where I kind of figured it out. And it wasn't too long ago, actually, where I was able to kind of put it into words, this thing that we felt. I respect the heck out of the guys at Newfound Research, a great research shop. Not sure if you follow anything from them. But one of their leaders put out an insightful kind of Twitter cascade of basically apologizing from a quantitative perspective for not beating a benchmark over 2020. And as much as I respect those guys, I couldn't disagree more. Even though we have models that beat benchmarks, we have models that didn't, right? I mean, that's just the nature of 2020. If there's any financial advisor out there that looks back on 2020 and their first thought is, man, I didn't beat a benchmark. I didn't make a whole bunch of money during a global pandemic. I didn't increase risk in March and buy everything in Apple and Amazon. That's what I really should have done. In my opinion, you shouldn't be a financial advisor. We support the advisors to sit back and say, I promised my clients prior to the pandemic that I was going to help them achieve all their hopes and dreams. And when massive amounts of confusion, economic upheaval, market upheaval happened, I pulled back the reins for my clients because that's the best thing to do to achieve their long-run goals. If the markets happen to rebound because we pumped a bunch of stimulus in, great, fine, whatever. But the financial plan my clients had coming in are the exact same plans on the way out. And it didn't dent them one bit, and we're going to move on. Those are the advisors we support, bar none, bottom line. And the fact that there's a contingent of our industry that is looking at 2020 and post-mortem and saying, did you beat the benchmark, is the absolute dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And in my opinion, it's everything wrong with our industry. That shouldn't even be a question, because everyone knows that the only reason the benchmark did anything was unprecedented levels of stimulus and completely blown up economic data. That's not investing anymore. That's gambling. And those advisors are doing this for themselves and not doing it for the advisor. If you increase risk during a pandemic, you're doing that for you because you want to look good. I don't care what you say beyond that. Mm-hmm. And this is how we approach the industry. 25% of advisors love us. 50% don't care about asset management anyway. They just think asset management is a commodity and a complete waste of time. Just buy the index and let it go. And the other 25% want to fight me on this. So we're cool with our 25%. That's how we see the world.
Yeah.
Did something notable happen in 2020? I don't know.
I don't remember.
Memory's a little foggy. I just
I don't know. I got the vaccine. I can't remember anything anymore, so I don't know.
Oh, you broke up
on
me.
Just keep going, Mark.
For any of our listeners, you should go watch this video on YouTube so you can see all of the frozen Josh faces.
Yeah, there was a good one a couple minutes ago.
I know.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, hey, so Josh, that's probably a good place to wrap up and kind of head into the bonus round and then go into, because we're starting to transition really into what you guys do, and I'm really excited to dive into that. So thank you for being on the show. We're going to go into our speed round. These are just a couple quick questions. So if you were to go back in time and give young Shuba a piece of advice, what are you telling yourself?
Oh man, if I were to go back and give young Shuba a piece of advice, in reality, I would have dug more into and been an earlier adopter of deeper levels of technology. I would have gotten into the fintech space earlier than I did. Helios was around for a couple of years before we started really investing in technology, and so I would have done that faster. I think that would be it.
Contrary to contrary to Josh and my saying, which is just technology stupid, internet's a fad.
Yeah. And it always breaks.
It always breaks. I unplug it, I plug it back in, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that'd be it. Get deeper into technology earlier. Yeah.
Perfect. So question 2, any books that you would say, hey, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, go read this book and make it happen?
2 books. The first one is Who Moved My Cheese? I mean, classic. Takes about 5 minutes to read. Who Moved My Cheese? Right? And that goes back to my advice. The problem's going to change. You got to change with it. Another great book that meant a lot to me is, especially if you're building a business and you have to sell it, StoryBrand's a great book. I would read that one.
Okay.
Yep. I've got great multiple storyboards on mystorybrand.com. Yes. No, yep. I'm an avid believer of that too.
Yeah, I think it's great. Yeah. It's just a great way to look at the world because everyone buys stories. Yeah. They just really do.
I'm gonna change up the third one because knowing that you said your family's in Minnesota and you work there. Okay, so can you do some quantitative analysis and please help the Vikings draft a good kicker? As a lifelong Vikings
fan, man.
As
Gary
a lifelong and Walsh and Bailey blew it this year a couple times. I mean, as a lifelong Vikings fan, it's like whenever it comes to a punt or if it's down to that line, I'm like, I've got like a 25% confidence we're gonna pull this off.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do you one better here. I grew up in New Orleans, so I'm a Saints fan.
Okay.
So I am not super happy with the Vikings. Let's just be super clear with you here. Like, I'll give you an example here. Like, people know this about me so much. Like, they've made me glasses of the Minnesota Miracle.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, every bit of Minnesota hate mail you can possibly get, I get as a Saints fan. So, you know, Drew Brees is retiring here. I need a moment. I need a moment.
Yeah. No.
Real quick.
So with the headbutting of the Saints and the Vikings, mad respect for Drew Brees. My Drew Brees story is I was 1 week on the job at Starbucks when I was in college, sweeping the floor, dedicated to my job, and I literally swept the floor right behind Drew Brees and just kind of kept going. He left. Everyone freaked out. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Drew Brees is at our store!" And I was like, "I'm never going to look at the floor while sweeping ever again." I was so mad. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, he had just signed that giant contract with the Saints, and I was. My joke is I breezed right by him.
Nice. Bummed. Yeah, everyone's got a Drew Brees story except for me. Everybody I know's met him except me. I'm just waiting my turn.
Quick, again, to timestamp something. How cool was that thing with him and Tom Brady at the Superdome after the game?
Yeah.
You saw that video? That was pretty cool. Very class act on both sides.
Yeah, just a lot of respect for, you know, two of the OGs, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Old guys. Yes, for us old guys. Yay.
I don't know if you guys saw that Frank Caliendo did that voiceover on that picture of Brady and Breeze, like with the super old makeup or whatever. You know, they did Photoshop.
Yeah.
It's like, the winner is going to face off against that nice young man, Aaron Rodgers.
Now, my wife is from Green Bay, so she's, you know, lives and dies, you know, the Packers. So I have to deal with that too.
You know, I'm going to retract my question. I'm going to say you should not send your quantitative analysis to go draft a Vikings kicker, because I think you're going to tweak the data so that they always have a bad one.
You know, if you ask me the question of if I, you know, sold Helios and won the lottery and I didn't really have to do anything anymore to live my life, what would I do? I would volunteer to work for free in the Saints front office, and I would do all the analytics of their who they should draft. That's my dream job, by the way. So,
all right.
If Saints or any NFL team, if you're listening to this, hey, come give me a call. Give me a call.
We have had a former NFLer on the podcast, so you never know. This could be your break, Chris. This could be it.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm ready.
So, Chris, blank check, golf anywhere in the world with any celebrity or two. You take them with you. You're gonna fly their private jet the whole 9 yards. Where are you going? Who are you taking?
Yep. All right. So I've been told I've golfed some cool places, but I've been told that I have not golfed the number one place, which is Royal County Down in Scotland, I think. So I'm gonna pick that one just sight unseen, just because I'm told it's the best.
Okay.
Either that or Cypress Point. And I am going to, you know, I can name a lot of very cool, very important, very influential people that would be great to have a round of golf with. But when I golf, I'm about sheer entertainment and enjoyment. So if I had to fill out my foursome, it would be Charles Barkley, just because I have to see that golf swing live like a bunch.
Have to. Yes. Yes.
John Daly, because you never know what John Daly's going to do, but he'd probably give me some pointers, right? So I got my golf pro in there, or former golf pro. It would have to be John Daly. And then I would drink John Daly's the whole time just for the irony. And the last person on my foursome would probably be, oh man, that's a tough one. I knew I'd be on the spot here. I know exactly who I would have. I would have Howard Stern.
There we go. Howard Stern.
I thought you were going to Bill Murray.
Howard Stern.
Well, because think about what I created. I've got the entertaining golf swing with Charles Barkley, so I have something to watch, my visual. I have John Daly, which is something to drink. And then I have Howard Stern for commentary. Here's my audio. He's going to narrate the whole thing.
There you go.
So it's just surround sound awesomeness. I don't know. That's the most ridiculous foursome I can think of on the fly. I didn't want to say anything serious because who wants to hear that, right?
Yeah, it's 2021. No more seriousness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
love
mean,
it.
come on.
Awesome.
I love
Well, thank
That's
you so
awesome.
much for being, we're really excited to hear more on the next episode about Helios, more of the the nerdy stuff that you guys do.
Sure.
For anyone watching on the YouTube, we'll probably get into some of the math that you see on the snowboard behind him. But thank you so much for just sharing your story of how you went from a young kid who was entrepreneurial to where you're at today. So really exciting stuff.
I appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah. Real quick, nothing we can say or nothing we say can be taken as tax, legal, or financial advice. If there was something on this podcast that you found interesting, please follow up with a professional, your CPA, attorney, financial advisor, and get some professional direction from those sources. Thank you very much.